In today's video, we're taking a look at the latest rumors from around the NHL, including some trade talk around teams like Montreal, Los Angeles, Carolina, Vancouver, and Boston. We have some major injury updates when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks. We have the NHL 3 Stars of the Week, and Carey Price spoke to the media, so we have an update on his condition and where things are going from here. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to discuss today. Let's get into some NHL news from around the league. First up, the Vancouver Canucks, of course, as we know, remain winless. They have a tough game tonight against the Carolina Hurricanes, and they were dealt another tough blow that's going to make the situation even harder to work through, and it's not going to make Bruce Boudreau's job any easier. That much we know for sure. So here's some injury updates on Vancouver. Tucker Pullman's been officially moved to long-term injury reserve. Apparently he has some good days and bad days, and they don't really have a clear timetable on when he's going to be back. So another top four right shot defenseman out of the lineup. Quinn Hughes has now been upgraded to week. We know he missed the home opener, and it wasn't really clear just yet how long he was going to be out. So being week to week, it's fair to say he won't play this week, and next week's a possibility depending on how things progress. Same goes for Travis Dermott. So that's three defensemen that would be in your top six, most of which are in your top four, not playing at all, which is really like the D-core is already the weak point. You take away some of your normal starting top four. It's no wonder they're having such a difficult time. There are other reasons and other things at play here, but that's certainly not helping matters in the least. Riley Stillman, also who they picked up from Chicago, he's also out. He's listed as day-to-day though, so he won't be as long. And Brock Besser's out tonight as well, so he's listed as day-to-day. So that's a lot of injuries for a team that's struggling to find a way to win. Certainly appears that they've got a lot going on, and we're going to talk about the Canucks here a little bit further into the video as well. So stay tuned for another section here in a few minutes. Now, the NHL 3 Stars of the Week were Sabres defenseman Rasmus Dahlin gathering first star. Senators captain Brady Tkachuk was the second star, and Devils goalie Mackenzie Blackwood was the third star. They all had a really good string of games here. Of course, Dahlin scoring in 5 straight games. Brady Tkachuk had several goals and assists and leading his team to 3 straight victories. And Mackenzie Blackwood, after a rough start, certainly has been much better as well for the Devils after winning some games there. So certainly all very much deserving of those accolades. Of course, Carey Price, as I mentioned, spoke to the media today for the first time in quite some time. I know some people thought maybe he was going to announce retirement. I don't suspect we're ever really going to see that. He's got a lot of term on his contract. Doesn't make any sense for him to retire because he'd be forfeiting a lot of money. So if anything, good chance though he remains on LTIR possibly for the remainder of the contract. We've talked about before how there's a good chance he won't play again. Essentially, though, he said he's not really focused on retirement, so he's not really ready to call it quits, but at the same time acknowledges that there's a lot of work to be done and almost a small miracle, so to speak, to be able to make the comeback. He's really more than anything focused on living pain-free day to day. Of course, he had done an interview as well with The Athletic about a week and a half ago or so, which we had discussed. And a lot of the same things he said in that interview were kind of reiterated here today. So obviously, like the knee issues, and not just about playing hockey here. This is something that bothers him every day, all the time. And he's at this rate wants to at least be, comfortable to live and play with his kids and do all the things as a dad and a husband that you'd like to do, and not have pain doing so. So that's still a big focus of his. There is a surgery that he can have. It's comparable for baseball players and pitchers who have Tommy John surgery. It'd be a really long recovery, and there's only 60 to 70% chance that it's successful. And Carey Price said before, he's not a betting man. Doesn't like those odds. He doesn't want to go through all that surgery, all that recovery, if it's not going to work. There's always a possibility the knee doesn't get better and maybe even gets worse from it, and that's not something he was fond of. So I think at this point he's still kind of trying to find other solutions if there's possibly going to be one. Mentioned he still has dreams and aspirations to win a Stanley Cup, but he also said at whatever position. I wonder if that might be some foreshadowing that maybe Carey Price obviously sees himself staying in hockey in another role if he can't be an active player on the ice. So I guess we'll have to see where this goes. I'm not sure how often we're going to get updates on Price, but based on their cap situation, based on what we learned today, based on what we already knew from his Athletic interview a couple weeks back, he's definitely not playing this year. And if we ever hear that he's having a surgery to try to make corrections, to make a comeback, a lot of the surgeries we're looking at is probably close to a year recovery. So it's a long ways out. He already sat out majority of last year, except for a handful of games. Going to be out this year. Once you're out 2-3 years, they comeback odds are just not very good. So to me, he's pretty well done. We've talked about this before. That's my opinion. He won't say that exactly, which I don't blame him at this point. I'm sure, like I said, he'd love to be able to play. Like, for him to say that he doesn't want to retire, I get it completely. But what you want to do and what your body allows you to do, not always the same things, unfortunately. So we'll have to see. But at this rate, like I said, the focus is on just being able to live day to day, pain-free if he can. And hopefully they'll figure things out with his knee injury so that he has, at the very least, a better quality of life, even if he doesn't make a return to the ice. Now, of course, some other news around the Montreal Canadiens. We've talked about them at length, that different things that we're going to see from them this year. They're certainly one of the teams that are expected to be very active for a variety of reasons. One, I know they had a decent start to the season. Many people still feel like by the time we get further along, they will be near the bottom of the standings. Maybe not necessarily in the league, but certainly in their division. I think there's definitely teams that are expected to finish below them. I don't think they're going to be too much in the conversation for first overall, but they do have a lot of players that have been not getting the job done. Like, they're really, if you look at their stats, outside of like Suzuki and Caulfield and a little bit of Josh Anderson, they're not really getting a lot of secondary scoring. Monahan and Doc are doing okay, but you get a lot of players not really pulling their weight, at least production-wise. So, looking at Hoffman, Drouin, Dodonov, even Gallagher still only has 1 goal and 1 point on the season. So they need to find a better supporting cast, and they certainly want to work away at this. Dvorak's another one. He's pointless in 6 games this year as well. And obviously they want to look at their decor as well. Thankfully, they're young guys. Like I said, with Arbor Jackeye getting a lot of attention, obviously, for a variety of reasons. In fact, some cool nicknames. Like, he's really become a fan favorite really quickly there. Understandably so. Of course, Jordan Harris has done okay as well. You got Kovacevic, that they picked up on waivers, has been pretty good. They got some other D coming. Like, they do have some good young D, but there's been talk for quite some time now that they would really like to add another veteran defenseman, preferably somebody who can even play possibly on the right side as well. There's some speculation that one of the defensemen in LA may be available. Maybe Sean Walker. No real clear-cut sources indicating that that's a for sure thing. But the LA Kings do have more than enough defensemen, in counting some of the young players that are fighting for ice time. And the LA Kings have also been linked to Jacob Chychrun. Outside of the Ottawa Senators, have been the team most discussed, but they've been a team that's been mostly discussed by NHL insiders now, saying that deal is pretty much not happening. So you're looking to other options around the league. LA does make a lot of sense, and there has been reported interest there for some time. So it might make sense for them to move out a defenseman, one, because they can kind of afford to do that with their depth, but at the same time, if they're going to be going for Chychrun, they'd probably want to do that anyway. So we'll have to wait and see. But Montreal and LA might find themselves becoming trade partners here to get a veteran defenseman in Montreal to take the pressure off some of these kids and to kind of help them out a little bit on that back end. Another defenseman to watch as well, as we talked about before, is Ethan Bear. We mentioned him yesterday as well, with Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts on the weekend, saying that he felt that there was a good chance that situation gets resolved over the next couple of weeks and Carolina finds a trade for him. There have been some teams like the Vancouver Canucks, the Toronto Maple Leafs have been linked to that, checking in on that situation as well. Both teams could benefit from a defenseman. Of course, we talked about Vancouver and how many injuries they have, especially on the back end. That team desperately needs D, and Bear could be a good fit there as well. I can see that making a lot of sense. When it comes to the Maple Leafs, they're dealing with obviously injuries as well. Jake Muzzin, uncertainty, but of course he plays the left side. Liljegren's going to be out for a little while longer, so it probably makes more sense for Vancouver, to be honest. But at the same time, even Ottawa, Toronto, there's a lot of Canadian teams that make sense for this guy. Not to say 100% he'll end up there, because there's certainly some other teams too that make sense for an Ethan Bear acquisition. But they're the ones getting the most attention around here, at least, that are connected to the defenseman who really wants out of Carolina to get a chance to play. Now, back to Vancouver. Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick today talking about the Canucks on their recent podcast. And I tell you, there is some talk from Elliot Friedman that they are indeed looking for a new coach. It seems like Bruce Boudreau's seat is getting hotter by the day. He confirms that his sources say that they are definitely looking for a new coach. Doesn't mean 100% that they're going to fire Boudreau, that they're going to make a change, but they're starting to do their research. They're starting to talk to people, starting to see what's possibly some other candidates that could maybe come in. And if it gets to the point that they feel like they need or want to make a move, they'll have somebody possibly lined up so it can happen and get hopefully a quick transition. Sometimes, you see that already happening behind the scenes. The GM or the president will be looking for a new coach, and they make it a firing and hiring all at the same time. They usually hold off until they have that replacement lined up. So that's interesting to note, considering I really don't know that you can blame Bruce Boudreau for any of the falters of the Canucks. I mean, you do at the same time, though, there's only so many cards they can play to get this ship back on track here in Vancouver. But they also talked about the possibility that should the Canucks at this point maybe just accept the fate and maybe just consider tanking. This is, of all the years to tank, this has been, and personally, I tell you, I'm not a fan of tanking. I never have been, but I do understand why some teams do it. And at the same time, the other thing, though, is that you can't tell the players that they're not supposed to win. You just can't do that. And players have their own careers to worry about. They have their own, they have competitive spirit to follow. Like, they're not going to stop trying. It's just that simple. But what you see when a team is tanking is the GM trade away a lot of the talent to make it so that it's much more likely that they won't win, right? That's just usually what you see. Look how bare the roster is in Chicago. But even then, they're trying hard and they're getting some wins. They've actually won the last few games, and you're starting to wonder. I mean, even Arizona beat the Maple Leafs the other week. So, teams like that, it doesn't mean they lose all the time, and it certainly doesn't mean that the players aren't going to try. But Connor Bedard would be one heck of a nice reward for a bad season. To me, of all the players that have been first overall picks recently, I honestly think he's going to be the best one, maybe since McDavid. It's hard to say, but if you look back at some of the recent first overall picks in the last 5-6 years, I don't know that really. I think you have to go back to McDavid before there's somebody there you can say that meets the criteria to be labeled a generational player. And right now, Bedard looks like he's going to be that guy. Now, of course, he's a prospect still. Not everything figures out and translates to the NHL when you have players at the lower levels in junior. But there's a lot of people that feel confident in making that kind of a statement. So at the end of the day, Connor Bedard is from Western Canada. Connor Bedard, I believe, I'm not 100%, but I believe he did grow up a Canucks fan. So I think he'd probably be happy there. And not to say that they're going to be able to get the first overall pick, but if they did, I mean, that would be one heck of a boost for them. But like I said, a lot of things have to continue to go wrong. You're likely going to see Boudreau lose his job, and some of the veteran players maybe get moved. But I know there's a lot of talk from some of the vets. I mean, JT Miller was asked because there was a jersey thrown on the ice the other night at the home opener. All he said, and it really didn't, I understand where he's coming from, but he said he's got a job to do. All he's worried about is trying to help the Canucks win and get things back on track. And if people want to take their hard-earned money and spend all that money to go to a game and then throw the merchandise that they spent a lot of money on the ice, then that's up to them. But he didn't really seem to care, didn't really offer much more comment than that, which I know kind of got fans riled up too. So I don't know what's going on in Vancouver. I mean, some trades are likely coming. I can't imagine Jim Rutherford sitting idly by and going to see some deals. We've heard Connor Garland, sorry, not Bedard, would be a prime candidate that we could see moved. And I even wonder about Miller at this point. I mean, at the same time, when he's not playing well to start the season on a brand new big ticket contract like he's got, that's not going to be easy, or you're going to be selling low. So that's probably not happening either. But, are they going to consider moving some guys like a Garland or a Besser or somebody who maybe they can get a couple more really good defensemen to help that back end? Because that back end it's really weak and it really needs work. So we'll see. When it comes to the Boston Bruins, another player to watch there. They're off to a good start. If they keep it up and they're in it at the deadline, I fully suspect Boston will be a team that makes a good run for it and adds at the deadline to be buyers. And, they want one last kind of hurrah here with this group. It's definitely apparent to see. Bringing back Bergeron, bringing back Krejci, and one name to watch that could be a trade piece for them to use to make upgrades to the deadline would be youngster Jack Studnicka, who still at this age, after all this time, has failed to consistently, get a regular spot in that lineup and stick as a full-time NHLer. And I do think that there's teams out there that would probably give him a chance. It doesn't mean for sure that he'll go, but certainly a young player, I think, at this point that they're willing to set free, basically, in order to get another player in that's going to help them hopefully go on another deep playoff run and challenge for the Stanley Cup yet again. But let me know your thoughts on everything discussed today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.